អាមេរិកជួបដំណឹងទៅរុស្ស៊ីប្រមាណម៉ោងមុនលោកโจ Biden ទៅអ៊ុយក្រែនអាមេរិកអ៊ុយក្រែនមន្ត្រីរដ្ឋាភិបាលអាមេរិកបានឲ្យតម្រុយទៅទីក្រុងម៉ូស្គូដើម្បីឲ្យរុស្ស៊ីដឹងជាមុនអំពីដំណើរទស្សនកិច្ចរបស់លោកโจ Biden នៅទីក្រុងគៀវប្រទេសអ៊ុយក្រែនការជូនដំណឹងនេះធ្វើឡើងតែប៉ុន្មានម៉ោងប៉ុណ្ណោះមុនពេលលោកโจ Biden ចេញដំណើរនេះបើតាមការបញ្ជាក់របស់អ្នកនាំពាក្យសេតវិមានដែលទទួលបន្ទុកក្នុងកិច្ចការសន្តិសុខជាតិទស្សនកិច្ចនេះអាចទុកថាជាព្រឹត្តិការណ៍ដ៏សំខាន់មួយនិងគួរឲ្យប្រុងប្រយ័ត្នបំផុតព្រោះទីក្រុងគៀវរងការវាយប្រហារដោយរុស្ស៊ីងាយស្រួលបំផុតម្យ៉ាងវិញទៀតអាមេរិកមិនទាន់បានរៀបចំប្រព័ន្ធការពារសន្តិសុខឲ្យបានរឹងមាំជូនលោកโจ Biden នោះឡើយអ្នកយកព័ត៌មានបានជជែកសួរលោក Jake Sullivan ដែលជាអ្នកទីប្រឹក្សាសន្តិសុខជាតិប្រចាំសេតវិមានអំពីបញ្ហាថាតើសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកបានផ្ញើសារឬជូនដំណឹងទៅរុស្ស៊ីហើយឬនៅអំពីដំណើរទស្សនកិច្ចមួយនេះសូមជម្រាបថាលោកโจ Biden បានសន្យាទៅនឹងចំពោះមេដឹកនាំអ៊ុយក្រែនលោក Zelensky ថាអាមេរិកនឹងផ្ដល់ជំនួយយោធាគិតជាទឹកប្រាក់ស្មើនឹង$500,000 លាននៅក្នុងកញ្ចប់ជំនួយនេះក៏មានក្របរំសៀវនិងជើងតម្រកំជ្រួចវងជាច្រើនគ្រឿងផងដែរបន្ថែមពីនេះទៅទៀតប្រធានាធិបតីអាមេរិកលោកโจ Biden បានអញ្ជើញទៅដល់ទីក្រុងគៀវដែលជាទស្សនកិច្ចគួរឲ្យភ្ញាក់ផ្អើលមួយនៅថ្ងៃទី20ខែកុម្ភៈនេះមុនពេលលោកបំពេញទស្សនកិច្ចទៅកាន់ប្រទេសប៉ូឡូញ
Very significant moment on the world stage. President Biden met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during this unannounced trip. It comes just days before the one-year mark of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. This moment is highly significant this morning. Biden sending a strong message of support to Ukrainians as air raid sirens wailed across Kyiv, underscoring the very real risk involved in this trip. Both leaders spoke a moment ago about the weight of this historic moment.
President Biden, that is so important signal for us, and all we are proud of it. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. President.
It's good to be back in Kyiv. I was telling the president, one of my newer staff members on the flight from Washington into Poland asked me how many times I've been to Kyiv, and I had to stop and think it's my 8th trip. And much has changed, much of it bad with the invasion, but also the Ukrainian people have stepped up in a way that few people ever have in their own defense, and have apparently also embraced the notions of democracy. No longer discussions about whether or not certain privileged people have control.
We have CNN coverage from all fronts this morning. Phil Mattingly is here with me in Warsaw. Clarissa Ward is standing by on the ground in Kyiv. Fred Pleitgen is in Moscow, and Kylie Atwood is at the State Department. Of course, this is a historic visit by President Biden. It is actually his 8th visit to Ukraine, his first, though, since Russia invaded. It's a visit that he has said he has wanted to make since 11 months ago, but now, of course, President Biden has finally made it under a shroud of secrecy. Clarissa Ward knows that well. She was watching this entire visit happen before it could actually be reported, Clarissa, that President Biden was there on the ground in Kyiv. What could you see from your vantage?
So, Caitlin, we're now here in the square where President Biden was. He was inside St. Michael's Church just behind me, and you could hear those air raid sirens start wailing. There was a moment where everybody was wondering whether he was actually going to come out of the church. He and President Zelensky came out of the church. They met up with 2 soldiers who were carrying wreaths, and then they proceeded to kind of march over to this area where you can see several wreaths. You can also see a lot of television cameras. Of course, this is a huge news story here in Ukraine. And you can see behind me, just there next to that reporter, this is the U.S. wreath that was laid as President Zelensky and President Biden looked on. The two leaders then embraced. The air raid sirens finally stopped wailing, and President Biden got into his motorcade. And I should say it was an extraordinarily huge motorcade. This entire area was completely blocked off to traffic. The streets were empty. Our live shot position is up on the balcony of the hotel behind me, and we had multiple visits from soldiers who told us under no circumstances were we to go out on the balcony. At one stage, they came up even to tell us to stand back further from the window. So there was a lot of security that went into this. This is a trip that many people have been waiting a long time for. And as you heard from President Zelensky talking about how meaningful this was, Caitlin, what a strong signal of support. And that is something we're hearing reflected again and again, talking to ordinary Ukrainians. We needed this right now, and we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and there's actual support that they are sending as well. Clarissa, what a remarkable moment, though, was as President Biden and President Zelensky were walking into the church, I believe, that's behind you, air raid sirens were actually going off in Kyiv as President Biden was on the ground, right?
And it's interesting because, you know, the expectation had been that with the president here, it might be a quiet day. The Russians almost certainly already knew he was here. They'd be unlikely to do something like, extraordinary, like launching a missile attack on this city while the president was here. But when we heard those air raid sirens, the first thing you want to find out is what type of threat has been reported. In this case, it was MiG activity over Belarus. That, again, is something that we have on an almost daily basis, but it does take on pretty loaded significance when